Professor Dr. Paul de Knop, thank you very much for the honor of being with us today at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy here in Berlin. We have a few questions that we'd like to ask you so we can get your thoughts and opinions on a few issues. So first of all, how does the construction of the self impact cultural diplomacy and cross-continental cooperation?
Well, it's a difficult question. First of all, I want to say that diplomacy, it's not only about telling, but it's also about listening. So you have to learn the culture of the other country. But this doesn't mean that you have to exclude your own culture. In the past, very often people came to Brussels, to Europe, to Paris to learn about the culture. But nowadays we have to face that the world is going more global, and people of course are traveling more, but it doesn't mean that they know better the culture. So we have set up a project where we intertwine education, so the academic diplomacy, and cultural or sport diplomacy. So it's a mix of several things. It's good that academics, like students, like professors, the staff, has more mobility, because then you have more opportunity to exchange the cultural ideas, the opinions, to get to know each other. But besides academic field, you have cultural and the sports that are what we call very low barriers. So you don't have to know very much of the language to enjoy music, for instance, or to appreciate painting. You can participate in sport without knowing the language of the country. Everybody knows the rules, and so the barriers are very low, and it means that people get into contact with each other. So to summarize, as well, academy, so the university, the mobility of students, of staff, as sport, as cultural affairs are very good opportunities to get to know each other and to have some diplomacy, intended or not intended.
Okay.
How do you perceive the role of cultural diplomacy for a country like Belgium in the context of the European debates on the European identity and culture nowadays?
Well, first of all, you have to know that the European Union consists of several countries, but even more cultures. For instance, Belgium is a country where 3 languages are spoken, but it's not only the language that is different. So we have Dutch, French and German. Although the most spoken language in Brussels is English, to give you an idea. But also the culture of the parts of the country is very different. So we have a lot of cultural differences in Europe. And to have one European Union, you need very much intertwining, getting to know people. And it's not only the institutions, but what is done behind those institutions that makes that the union is working. And therefore, as I said to your colleague before, sport as well as academia, as cultural things are very good to get to know each other, to get in contact with. And Belgium is a very small country, but that's a big problem and a big opportunity. Why is it a problem? Because if you want to participate in several actions, it costs a lot for a small country. For instance, we heard here about a disaster in the Philippines. Well, we contributed like other countries, but for a small country it's more difficult because you don't have the same funding available. But we have also a lot of opportunities, because if you're a small country, then first of all we know a lot of languages, but also being a small country in the heart of Europe, then it's easier to become a head of a European organization or to be a diplomat, because we have always been overwhelmed by big countries. And in Europe it still is a problem if somebody from France is the head of institution, then you will have the Germans or the British people that say, well, why not we? But being a small country, nobody fears the small country. So that's the reason also that we have a lot of Belgians that are very active in international organizations because of the language, because of the culture of being people that always have to make win-win situations and not being a threat to other countries. So that's, I think, the power of Belgium. And of course, we're the capital of Europe. If you make a cross over Europe, you're right in the heart of Brussels. So Brussels has more diplomats than everywhere in the world. We have a lot of journalists being there, but also it's a center of cultural, of people, artists, musicians, fashion. We have, so I think Belgium have great opportunities to do this. And now I hear that also the voices are coming up again to leave Strasbourg because it costs a lot of to the people from the European Commission to go once in a month to Strasbourg. Why not gathering all together and doing it in Brussels? And we have also a very good mobility because we have the airport, we have the high-speed train, we have very good highways. So I think we have a lot of opportunities.
That's good to hear. You mentioned earlier how certain cultural activities such as music and sports are essentially universal. Can you point out any strong cross-cultural differences in ways that one constructs the self, particularly between Europeans and people from any other region?
Well,
it's a broad question.
It's tough because first of all, I want to say that, in my opinion, Belgians are not aware enough about their importance, about their heritage, about the opportunities they have. I give you an example. We are very well known about our cuisine. We have famous chocolate and beers, but if you go all over the world, what do you see? You see the 5 rather middle-class beers of the Netherlands. And we have more than 300 excellent beers and we're not promoting that enough. So I think it's very important to get to know your heritage, to know what are your opportunities, to create a self-image that, well, we are not just a small country. Even in a small country can make a difference. For instance, that is what I want to give an example of. When we go to countries like China, like Korea, Belgians have their cultural, and we have brought there 6 kind of different cultural activities to show that even in a small country, even that it's not well known, that Belgium can be of an importance. That is very important. It's not how great you are, but it's what you do with your heritage and what you do with your personality.
The next question would be, how do you think that we can inspire the younger generation to use cultural diplomacy as means to strengthen international relations?
Yeah, first of all, I think that we have to give better and more classes in history. Our youngsters don't know enough what is the origin of Belgium, why do we have 3 languages. So, first of all, it's history. Secondly, we have to improve the knowledge and the awareness of the youngsters that they have to be proud in every country. What is your history, what is your culture, what is your language, what is your... So all those kind of elements we have to educate the youngsters. And I think that by sending them abroad, if you go abroad, you see, of course, the beauty of the city of Berlin, for instance, or the city of Shanghai or Beijing. But when you return, then you see also that it's very well living in Belgium, that we have several opportunities. I always say to the students when I go abroad, well, listen, if you come to Brussels, you're not only coming to Brussels, you come to Europe. Because within 1 hour and a half, you're in Amsterdam, in Paris, 1 hour you're in Berlin, you're even not 1 hour, because there's 1 hour difference with London and Brussels. So you can very easy travel. So for those students coming to Brussels, it's not only getting to know Brussels. So we have to, I think, to educate our youngsters, but also to let them travel. Travel to learn. There was an expression in the medieval times we had, but it was only for the upper class people that went on a grand tour. Before they went into government, they had to learn about Europe. And well, it's not Europe anymore, it's the world. And of course you have internet, but I think there's still a big difference if you are in the country and you get to know and to speak to the youngsters and the people in that country. So traveling, sending them away, having another degree from another country. And for those that are not able to study, well, you have the sport and the cultural. Everybody has talents. We have to find the talents and to improve the talents of the youngsters.
Okay. I have one last question just to wrap up on, and it's similar to the previous one. Do you think there's any way that cultural diplomacy can be used to aid the construction of the image of the self?
Yeah, of course. Diplomacy for me means you have to speak and to listen. It's an intertwining. I'm always looking for a win-win situation. You won't be happy here in this interview if you're not gaining something out of it. And I won't be happy if I'm not gaining something out of it. So, and that's what diplomacy is, to find what is the win in the situation for you and what's the win-in for me, and to find a common way to find a win-win. And that can be done by cultural diplomacy, because the barriers are much lower than if you go, for instance, in education. Because in education you have to know the language, you have to be intellectual, and so on and so forth. And this cultural and sport, but sport can be a part of culture, the barriers are much lower, and so it's a very good step in to the process.
Very true.
Thank you for your time, and it was an honor and privilege to have you here with us today.
It's a pleasure for me. Success in your life.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.